The emergency klaxons had been screaming for 3 hours straight. Dr. Sarah Vance no longer heard them. She sat in the central laboratory of Epsilon Station, staring at the diagnostic screen that kept delivering the same impossible verdict. Total systems failure, irreversible, fatal within 18 hours. Around her, 46 other human scientists worked in desperate silence. Some tried to repair the station's failing life support systems with tools and parts that simply didn't exist. Others sent increasingly frantic distress calls into the void, knowing that the nearest human settlement was 6 weeks away at maximum burn. A few just sat quietly, writing final messages to families they would never see again. Epsilon Station had been humanity's prize, a research outpost positioned at the confluence of 3 rare stellar phenomena. The data they'd collected over 5 years would advance human understanding of exotic matter by decades, but none of that mattered now. The station's fusion core had suffered a cascade failure, something the designers swore was impossible. The backups had failed next, then the emergency systems. Now they were running on batteries that would be dead by morning. Sarah pressed her palm against the cold viewport, looking out at the swirling purple and gold nebula that had been her home. It was beautiful, she thought. At least they would die surrounded by beauty. Dr. Vance? The voice belonged to Jin Park, her youngest researcher. He was 23, brilliant, and terrified. Should we record something for when they find us? Sarah turned to look at him. His hands were shaking. She thought about his mother, who had sent care packages every month without fail. She thought about her own daughter back on Earth, who was 7 years old and who still thought her mother was invincible. Yes, Sarah said quietly. Tell them we did everything we could. Tell them the data is worth it. Tell them the proximity alarms blared, a different sound from the emergency klaxons. Every head in the lab snapped toward the sensors. A ship. Something was approaching. It's not human, Park said, his fingers dancing across the console. The signature is, I've never seen anything like this. Organic components mixed with standard drives. Mars suggests a trading vessel. Maybe Caliph design? Sarah felt her heart hammer. The Caliph were known throughout this sector as peaceful traders, but they were reclusive, rarely interacting with other species. Their ships were grown as much as built. Strange living vessels that traveled the quiet routes between distant stars. Hail them, Sarah ordered. Tell them we're in distress. Tell them the communication channel opened before Park could finish. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a figure that made several of the researchers gasp. The Kurleth were insectoid, but that simple description failed to capture their otherworldly elegance. Iridescent carapaces shifted between deep blues and vibrant greens. Multiple delicate limbs moved with fluid grace. Compound eyes reflected light like scattered diamonds. The translator crackled, rendering the clicking, harmonic sounds into English. Human vessel, we have detected your distress. We see that your power systems have failed. We see that you are dying. Sarah stepped forward. Yes, we have 47 people aboard. Our fusion core failed. We have less than a day of life support remaining. If you can take even some of us, we cannot. The Caliph interrupted. Its mandibles moved in patterns the translator couldn't interpret. Our vessels are not designed for your biology. The atmosphere would poison you within hours. The pressure would cause organ failure. We are sorry. Sarah's hope crumbled. Of course. Why would an alien trader be equipped to rescue humans? They had been foolish to even imagine. However, the Kaleth continued. We carry something else. Something that may save you all. The creature gestured with 3 of its limbs. Behind it, Sarah could see other Kaleth moving quickly, purposefully. They were opening containers, large organic-looking pods that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent light. We are spore traders, the Kaleth explained. We cultivate and transport the rarest biological materials in this quadrant. In our holds, we carry the crystalline bloom of Theta Minoris. These spores are used to create medical compounds worth more than your entire station. A single pod sells for what your species would call 1 million credits. Sarah didn't understand. Why was it telling them this? The Kaleth's eyes seemed to focus on her, though it was hard to tell with those multifaceted orbs. These spores have another property. They generate oxygen through a rapid catalytic process when exposed to carbon dioxide. They also produce thermal energy as a byproduct. One pod, properly seeded throughout your station's ventilation system, would provide oxygen and heat for 300 of your days. Understanding dawned. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. You're offering to give us your cargo. We are offering to give you our entire cargo. The Kaleth corrected. 47 of your people would require all 30 pods we carry. We will seed them through your systems. We will stay until we are certain they have taken root and are functioning. We will ensure you survive. But Sarah's mind reeled. That's 30 million credits. That's your entire business, your livelihood. Yes, the Kaleth said simply. It is everything we own. Everything we have worked 3 cycles to gather. But you are dying, and we can prevent it. Is there another choice? One of Sarah's researchers, an older woman named Dr. Chen, stepped forward. Her voice was urgent. Doctor, we can't accept this. They'll be ruined. 30 million credits, that's generations of work for them. Sarah looked at the Kaleth, then at her crew, Jin Park, who still had his whole life ahead of him. Chen, who had grandchildren waiting for her stories. 47 human beings, each with families, dreams, futures. We will repay you, Sarah said to the Kaleth. I don't know how, but humanity will repay this debt. I swear it. On my life, on my daughter's future. We will remember what you're doing for us. The Kaleth's mandibles clicked in a pattern. The translator rendered as something between amusement and sadness. We ask for no debt. We want no payment. In our philosophy, there is a concept your translator cannot properly render. The closest approximation would be, life calls to life across the void. When we see life ending, and we have the power to prevent it, we must act. This is not business. This is simply what must be done over the next 6 hours. Sarah watched in amazement as the Kaleth worked. They moved with incredible precision, their multiple limbs allowing them to multitask in ways humans couldn't match. They wore environmental suits to protect themselves from the station's atmosphere, but that didn't slow them down. The spore pods were extraordinary. Each was roughly 2 meters across, a living sphere of crystalline structures that pulsed with soft blue light. The Caliph carefully opened each pod and extracted the spores' delicate, snowflake-like structures that seemed to dance in the air. They seeded the spores through every ventilation duct, every corridor, every chamber. Within an hour, Sarah could breathe easier. The thin, cold air was being replaced by something rich and warm. Within 3 hours, the temperature had risen to comfortable levels. Within 5, the station's atmospheric sensors showed oxygen levels climbing back to normal. The Caliph Captain Sarah learned its name was Shkara. Though the translator warned this was a crude approximation, explained the process as they worked. The spores will live for approximately 300 of your days. They will die naturally after that, having completed their life cycle. By then, your rescue will have arrived. The spores will harm nothing. They will simply grow, produce oxygen, and eventually fade to dust that your recycling systems can process. Why are they so valuable? Sarah asked, watching the beautiful crystalline structures multiply along the walls. Because they cannot be synthesized, Shkara explained. They can only be harvested from their native world once every stellar cycle. The medical compounds derived from them can cure diseases that nothing else can touch. They save lives, which makes them precious beyond measure. And you're using them all to save us. Yes, Shkara's compound eyes reflected the blue light of the spores. Because that is what they are for, saving lives. When the work was done, Shkara returned to the communication channel one final time. Behind the captain, Sarah could see the empty cargo holds of the Caliph ship. 30 pods that had been worth a fortune were gone, scattered through Epsilon Station's halls. You will survive now, Shkara said. Your people will come. You will return home. We ask only one thing, anything, Sarah said immediately. Do not let this diminish your research. Do not let fear keep you from the stars. You humans are young, but you are curious and brave. The galaxy needs that. Continue your work. Learn, grow. That is payment enough. Sarah felt tears running down her face. Around her, her entire crew stood in silence, watching the alien who had saved them all. I will tell everyone, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Everyone on Earth, everyone in every colony. I will tell them what you did. I will tell them that when we were dying in the darkness, the Caliph came. They asked for nothing and gave everything. I will tell them that humanity owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Shkara's mandibles clicked. We seek no debt, I know, Sarah replied. But you have one anyway, because humans remember. We remember kindness. We remember mercy. And someday, somehow, we will repay this. I promise you. The Caliph ship departed an hour later, disappearing into the nebula with empty holds and ruined finances. Sarah stood at the viewport with her entire crew, watching until the organic vessel's bioluminescent glow faded completely. What do we do now? Jin Park asked quietly. Sarah wiped her eyes. Now we survive. We collect our data. We go home. And then we make sure that promise means something. 6 weeks later, when the rescue ships finally arrived, they found Epsilon Station thriving in a garden of blue crystalline growth. The walls shimmered with life-giving spores. The air was sweet and warm, and 47 human scientists were alive and well, with a story that would change human culture forever. Sarah Vance returned to Earth as a hero, but she spent no time celebrating. Instead, she went directly to the Earth Council, accompanied by her entire crew. They stood before the assembled representatives of humanity's government and told their story. They showed recordings of the Koleth dumping 30 million credits worth of cargo to save strangers. They showed Shkara's words, "Life calls to life across the void." The council chamber was silent when they finished. Then, slowly, one representative stood. Then another, then all of them, in a gesture of respect that the chamber had rarely seen. The Speaker of the Council, a stern woman named Administrator Reeves, spoke with unusual emotion. "Dr. Vance, what you're asking for is unprecedented. You want us to create a formal protocol, a binding commitment that would obligate Earth and all her colonies to respond if the Koleth ever call for help." "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "I want it enshrined in our most fundamental laws. I want it taught in every school. I want every human child to know this story. I want it to be impossible for us to forget. And if that call comes in 100 years, 200, if it comes when it's inconvenient, when it's dangerous, when it costs us dearly," Sarah looked at the assembled representatives, "then we pay the cost. Because that's what they did for us. They didn't ask if it was convenient. They didn't calculate the profit and loss. They saw people dying and they stopped it. They gave everything. How can we do less?" The vote was unanimous. The Covenant Protocol was established that day, written into Earth's founding documents alongside the oldest human rights declarations. It was simple, absolute, and binding. If the Koleth call for help, humanity answers. No debate, no delay, no exceptions. This is our word, and our word is our bond. The protocol was more than just a political document. It became part of human culture. Children learned about Epsilon Station the way they learned about historical heroes. Artists created works depicting the Koleth sacrifice. The story was retold in every medium, from simple picture books to grand operas. Sarah Vance became the protocol's guardian. She established the Covenant Foundation, dedicated to monitoring the Koleth through whatever limited contact was possible. She gave lectures at universities across human space. She wrote her memoirs, which became required reading in schools. And she made sure that every human knew the name Shkara and understood what that name represented. Years passed. Sarah's daughter, Rachel, grew up hearing the story. She joined the diplomatic corps, specializing in xenocultural studies. She had children of her own and told them about the day their grandmother almost died in the stars, and about the aliens who saved her. Decades passed. Sarah grew old, her hair turning white, her hands developing tremors. But she never stopped telling the story. On her 90th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren, she received a communication that made her weep. It was from Shkara. The Koleth captain had survived, had rebuilt their business over long years of patient work. The message was simple. "We are glad you lived well. We are glad the promise of life across the void was kept. Be at peace, Dr. Vance. You owe us nothing, Sarah recorded a response, her voice wavering with age but firm in conviction. "You're wrong, my friend. We owe you everything, and humanity never forgets a debt to centuries past." Sarah Vance was long dead, but her story lived on. Humanity spread across the stars, building hundreds of colonies, developing powerful fleets. Joining the galactic community as a major power, they made friends and enemies, allies and rivals. They grew strong and prosperous, and in every ship, every station, every colony, there was a small plaque. It showed the Epsilon Station memorial symbol, a human hand, and a Caliph limb clasped together, surrounded by blue crystalline spores. Below it were always the same words: "The Covenant Protocol remains active. Humanity remembers." Most humans had never met a Caliph. The species remained reclusive, trading along distant routes, rarely venturing into major trade hubs. They became almost mythical, the aliens who had saved humanity's researchers long ago. A pleasant story from the history books. But the protocol remained, waiting, ready, because somewhere in the galaxy, Sarah Vance's great-great-grandson was preparing to learn just how seriously humanity took its promises. Marcus Vance stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic frigate Horizon, watching the stars stream past as they traveled through the trade routes near the outer spiral. He was 34 years old, a career diplomat with the Earth Foreign Service, and he carried his famous ancestor's name with a mixture of pride and burden. Everyone knew about Sarah Vance. Every human child learned her story in school. Marcus had spent his entire life hearing about his great-great-grandmother's promise, about the Covenant Protocol, about humanity's sacred debt. Sometimes he wondered if he'd chosen diplomacy because of that legacy or in spite of it. His communicator chimed. "Ambassador Vance, you have an incoming priority message. Source is listed as Caliph Collective." Marcus straightened immediately, his pulse quickening. In his entire diplomatic career, he'd never received communication from the Caliph. Few humans had. The species remained enigmatic, keeping to themselves, trading in rare goods along routes that rarely intersected with major human traffic. "Put it through," he said. The holographic display flickered to life. The figure that appeared was elderly, Marcus could tell, even though he'd never met a Caliph in person. The iridescent carapace was dulled with age, the compound eyes clouded. The creature's limbs trembled slightly as it moved. "Human ambassador." The voice came through the translator, clicking and harmonic. "I am High Mother Shivara of the Caliph Collective. I send this message to all species with whom we have traded, to all who might remember us." The creature paused. "But I send it especially to Earth, to the descendants of Dr. Sarah Vance and the 47 humans of Epsilon Station." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. This was it. After 200 years, the call was coming. "Our species is dying," Shivara continued, her voice heavy with resignation. 3 months ago, a plague began on our homeworld of Caliph Prime. It is not natural. It was engineered by the Viridian Consortium as a weapon of conquest. They created it specifically to target our biology. The image shifted to show Caliph in various stages of illness. Their beautiful carapaces turned black and cracked. Their limbs withered. Their compound eyes went dark. Marcus watched, horrified. As the recording showed entire cities of dying Caliph, the Viridians have offered us a choice. Shivara said, surrender all our worlds, all our resources, accept total subjugation or die. The plague is beyond our medical capability to cure. We have for months remaining before our population drops below sustainable levels. 5 months before the last of us are gone. The High Mother's mandibles clicked in a pattern the translators struggled with. When it finally rendered the emotion, it came through as profound sadness mixed with acceptance. We do not ask for help. That is not the Kurleth way. We have reached out to the Galactic Council, but they say interference would violate the Viridian Consortium's sovereignty. They say a cure would take years to develop, if it is even possible. They offer sympathy and regret, nothing more. Shivara's eyes seemed to look directly at Marcus, though he knew this was a recorded message sent broadly. We tell you this only so you will know what happened to us. So you will remember that the Caliph once existed, once traveled the stars, once believed that life calls to life across the void. We hope that philosophy will survive us, even if we do not. The image shifted one final time, showing a beautiful planet Caliph Prime. Marcus realized. Cities of organic architecture spiraled upward like living art. Gardens of bioluminescent plants created oceans of light. It was stunning, and it was dying. To the humans especially, we say this. You owe us nothing. Your Dr. Vance made a promise long ago, but we never accepted that promise. You are released from it. We ask only that you tell your children we were grateful for knowing you. Goodbye. The message ended. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the empty holographic space where Shivara's image had been. His hands were shaking. Sir, his aide, Lieutenant Jessica Torres, stood in the doorway. Her face was pale. The message just hit every communication network in human space. Earth is receiving it now. Sir, what do we do? Marcus activated his direct line to Earth Command. It connected immediately to Admiral Sarah Chen. Yes, that Chen. Descended from Dr. Chen, who had been on Epsilon Station. The coincidence would have been amusing under other circumstances. Ambassador Vance. Chen said without preamble, I assume you've seen the message. Yes, Admiral. I'm requesting immediate authorization to already done, Chen interrupted. The Earth Council invoked the Covenant Protocol 6 minutes ago. Unanimous vote. No discussion. Exactly as specified. I'm mobilizing the 2nd and 5th Medical Fleets immediately. 300 ships carrying our best doctors, our most advanced equipment, and every biomedical researcher who volunteered. And Ambassador? That was every single one we asked. Marcus felt his throat tighten. What about military escort? The 3rd Fleet is already moving. Admiral Okaro is taking personal command. He specifically requested the assignment. Said his grandmother was saved on Epsilon Station. Chen's voice softened slightly. Marcus, the Council is also sending you. They want a Vance there when we arrive. They say it's symbolic. When do we leave? Your ship is being rerouted now. You'll rendezvous with the medical fleet in 6 hours. We'll reach Caliph space in 11 days. Chen paused. Marcus, you should know this is going to be expensive. We're pulling resources from everywhere. Some colonies are complaining about the cost. the risk, the strategic exposure, and the council told them to study their history. The vote stood. We're going. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of his great-great-grandmother standing before the Caliph captain centuries ago, making a promise that seemed impossible to keep. But humanity was keeping it, against all logic, against strategic interest, against the complaints of accountants and politicians. Humanity was keeping its word. "Thank you, Admiral," Marcus said quietly. "Thank us when we save them." Chen replied. Chen out. The news spread across human space like wildfire. At first, there was confusion. Many younger humans barely remembered the Caliph story. It was ancient history, something from textbooks. Why was humanity mobilizing massive fleets for an alien species most had never even seen? Then the historians and educators began their work. They replayed the recordings from Epsilon Station. They showed the Caliph dumping 30 million credits worth of cargo without hesitation. They quoted Shkara's words about life calling to life across the void. They reminded humanity of Sarah Vance's promise. A professor at Lunar University gave an interview that was viewed by billions. Her name was Dr. Amara Okonkwo, and she spoke with fierce passion. "People ask why we're doing this," she said, looking directly into the camera. "Why are we spending resources? Why are we risking conflict with the Viridian Consortium? Why do we care about the Caliph? I'll tell you why. Because 200 years ago, they didn't ask those questions. They didn't calculate profit and loss. They saw humans dying and they stopped it. They gave everything." She held up a small crystalline structure, a preserved spore from Epsilon Station, kept in the university's museum. "This is what they sacrificed for us. This is worth a fortune. They had 30 of these, and they gave them all away to save 47 strangers. Now there are 40 billion humans across 300 worlds. And we're going to look at our descendants of those 47 people and say sorry. Helping the Caliph isn't strategically convenient." Dr. Okonkwo's eyes blazed. "We're doing this because this is who we are. This is who we chose to be when we created the Covenant Protocol. We are the species that remembers. We are the species that keeps its promises. We are the species that repays its debts, no matter how long it takes." The interview went viral. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers, doctors, nurses, engineers, soldiers. Everyone wanted to be part of the mission to save the Caliph. Marcus watched all of this from the horizon as it raced toward the rendezvous point. He read reports of colony governors pledging resources, of corporations donating medical supplies, of children holding fundraisers to support the relief effort, of elderly survivors from Epsilon Station's crew giving emotional interviews, tears streaming down their aged faces as they thanked the universe for letting them live long enough to see humanity honor its debt. One interview particularly moved Marcus. A 98-year-old man named Dr. Jin Park. Yes, that Jin Park. The young researcher from Epsilon Station spoke from his retirement home on Mars. "I was 23 years old," Park said, his voice wavering but clear. "I thought I was going to die in the cold and dark. Then the Caliph came. I remember watching them work, watching them destroy their own livelihood to save us. I remember asking Captain Shkara why they would do this. Do you know what they said? Park's eyes filled with tears. They said, "Life calls to life across the void." I didn't fully understand then. I was young, scared, just grateful to survive. But I've had 75 years to think about it. Now I understand. They were teaching us something fundamental about what it means to be a civilized species. They were showing us that some things matter more than profit, more than convenience, more than strategic calculation. The old man looked directly into the camera. Now it's our turn. Now we show them that we learned the lesson, that we remember, that humanity pays its debts. 11 days later, the combined human fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of Kaleth space. Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship Remembrance named specifically for this mission, and stared at the tactical display. The Kaleth system was blockaded. 40 Viridian Consortium warships formed a perimeter round Kaleth Prime, their weapons powered and their shields raised. They were reptilian vessels, sleek and predatory, designed for conquest. Admiral Okoro studied the formation with the calm expression of someone who had seen combat before. He was a tall man with graying hair and steady hands. They know we're here. They're waiting to see what we'll do. What are we going to do, Admiral? Marcus asked. That depends on you, Ambassador. Technically, this is a diplomatic mission with military escort. You're the ranking civilian authority. So, I'm asking, what are your orders? Marcus thought about his great-great-grandmother, about promises made 200 years ago, about 47 humans who had been saved by aliens who asked for nothing, about humanity's choice to be the kind of species that remembered. We're going through, Marcus said firmly. Open a channel to the Viridian commander. Let's see if we can do this diplomatically first. The holographic display flickered, showing a Viridian commander. The alien was covered in metallic scales that gleamed like burnished steel. Its eyes were cold, calculating. It spoke in clipped, precise tones. Human vessels. You are interfering in Viridian sovereign operations. The Kaleth have been declared a protectorate under consortium authority. Any attempt to enter this system will be considered an act of war. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Marcus stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. Commander, I am Ambassador Marcus Vance of the United Earth Government. We are here on a medical relief mission. The Kaleth are suffering from a plague. We have medical personnel and equipment that may help them. We're not here for conflict. The Viridian's eyes narrowed. The plague is a Kaleth internal matter. They have been offered the cure surrender to consortium authority, and the plague will be stopped. They have chosen to refuse. Their suffering is their own choice. You created the plague, Marcus said, unable to keep the anger from his voice. That is irrelevant. The Kaleth will surrender, or they will die. Human interference will not be tolerated. You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet. After that, we will open fire. The channel closed. Okoro looked at Marcus. Ambassador? Marcus thought about Dr. Okonkwo's words, about humanity's choice, about who they wanted to be as a species. Admiral, I'm invoking the full authority of the Covenant Protocol. This blockade ends now. If the Viridians want to start a war over this, that's their choice. But we're going through. Okoro smiled grimly. That's what I was hoping you'd say. He turned to his communication officer. "Open a channel. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this, the Viridians, the Kalef, and anyone else listening." The officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Okoro's voice rang out, clear and strong. "This is Admiral James Okoro of the Earth Defense Force. 200 years ago, the Kalef saved 47 human lives at tremendous cost to themselves. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. But humanity made them a promise anyway." He looked at the tactical display showing the Viridian blockade. "Today, we keep that promise. The Kalef are under Earth's protection. Any species that harms them harms us. Any species that threatens them threatens us. This is not negotiable. This is not debatable. This is our word, and our word is our bond." Marcus watched as the human fleet began to move. 300 medical ships at the center, surrounded by protective rings of warships. They advanced slowly, deliberately, giving the Viridians every chance to reconsider. "Sir, the Viridian fleet is powering weapons," the tactical officer reported. "Match them," Okoro ordered calmly. "Shields to maximum. Weapons hot but hold fire. They'll move or they won't." The two fleets drifted closer. Marcus could feel the tension on the bridge, could see it in every officer's face. This was it. This was the moment when humanity's promise would be tested with blood and fire. Then something unexpected happened. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving signals from multiple sources. Other species arriving in system." The tactical display updated, showing new FTL signatures. Ships began appearing, not many, but significant. 12 vessels from the Turian clans, 8 from the Osiran free traders, 5 from species Marcus didn't even recognize. A Turian captain's voice came through on the open channel, harsh and direct. "The Turian clans remember when the Kalef negotiated peace between our families. When we were on the brink of civil war, they asked for nothing. We stand with the humans. If the Viridians want war, they'll have it." An Osiran merchant added their voice. "The Kalef once shared their navigational charts with us freely, asking no payment. They are the reason our trade routes prosper. We stand with the humans." More voices joined, each telling a story of some past kindness from the Kalef. Some small, some large, but all remembered, all honored. The Viridian commander's face appeared again on the display. For the first time, Marcus saw something other than cold calculation. He saw uncertainty. "You would start a war over this?" the Viridian demanded. "Over a dying species that offers you nothing of value?" Marcus stepped forward. "That's where you're wrong, Commander. They offered us everything. They showed us what it means to value life above profit. They showed us what true civilization looks like. And yes, we will go to war to protect that. Not because we gain anything from it, but because that's who we choose to be." The standoff continued. Seconds stretched into minutes. The fleets drifted closer, weapons ready, shields charged. One shot, one mistake, and this would explode into war. Then, slowly, the Viridian ships began to move. Not attacking, withdrawing, creating a gap in their blockade. "They're opening a corridor," the tactical officer reported, disbelief in her voice. The Viridian commander's face was rigid with suppressed fury. "The consortium will remember this, humans. You have made powerful enemies today. We have honored powerful friends, Marcus replied quietly. We'll take that trade. The human fleet moved through the gap in the blockade. Medical ships racing toward Caliph Prime. Behind them, the Allied vessels held position, watching the Viridians, ensuring safe passage. As the Remembrance entered orbit around Caliph Prime, Marcus finally allowed himself to breathe. On the view screen, he could see the beautiful, dying world that the Caliph called home. We're here, he said softly. Now we keep the rest of the promise. Now we save them. Admiral Okoro placed a hand on his shoulder. Your great-great-grandmother would be proud. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. 200 years, across half the galaxy, through changes in politics, power, and priorities. But the promise had survived, and now, finally, it was being fulfilled. On Caliph Prime below, millions of dying aliens would soon learn that sometimes, across the vast darkness of space, someone remembers, someone comes, someone keeps their word, because humanity never forgets a debt.